So, I think I thought I would start by speaking about my project, which I showed you some of yesterday. The topic for I'm doing a research project, an artistic research project, focusing on speech as a musical material, and that was the reason that I wanted to bring together people these 2 days to show some different ways of doing that, and have different perspectives on that topic, and also I really wanted to hear their thoughts about it, and that's why we have these talks today. And well, there's so many things that can be done and can be said about the relationship between voice and speech and music, and this event is by no means comprehensive. There's a lot of other ways as well to approach this. In fact, there's a whole field of different ways, and I originally had invited Cathy Lane, a composer and academic from London, who has written about this field, and I think she has identified about 20 distinctively different ways of using speech and in music, or music and speech together. So this represents only part of that. And the part that I'm interested in is the ones who are close to what I'm trying to do, and that is seeing how to use the musicality in language, in spoken language, as a source for music. Also in relation to performance. And so just to give a bit about my background and why I became interested in this. My background is in improvised music as a keyboard performer. Piano and Hammond organ is my main instruments. And in improvised music, I was always kind of interested in this the relationship inside an ensemble. When you play, you constantly have to negotiate what direction it will take and what it will be about. And this dynamics of interplay is very much related to the interplay in conversation, because they are mostly improvised as well. You don't know what's going to be said, and you constantly have to think about what you're saying and also take into account what the others are saying. So there's a connection there that I find intriguing. And as well, there's the kind of the musical aspect of that interplay in conversation, where you not only listen to the words that have been said, you also listen to the ways they are said, and take that into account, trying to interpret what's the intention. So if you say something and somebody responds, well, then you're constantly trying to interpret. Oh, okay, maybe not now. Well, and that's the same. I feel that is somewhat similar to the improvised music setting, where you present some ideas, and then you have to get some feedback in order to go ahead or not. You could that's why you're relating to it as well. You can just go ahead, but then that's also a statement. That's also something that is going to be interpreted by the others. So that's my way into this field, and I did a project with on the Hammond organ, trying to develop new ways of playing that old bluesy instrument, and to challenge myself, I used these dialogue settings as a method, where I would play duets with many different instruments that I never had played before together with, and in order to try to confront myself with other ways of other thoughts or other musical possibilities, and that method of dialogue, so to speak, when you meet somebody you don't know, and then you have to kind of find some common ground, and then maybe you can come to new conclusions that you wouldn't have if you spoke to the same old guitar or whatever you used to play before. That was very exciting, and I got the idea that what if I go further and try to, with this metaphor or this analogy of a dialogue, and actually use speech as well inside this, and not do it just as a metaphor, but do it actually with speech as the source or the main material. So that was my idea. And at first I didn't know how it would sound like. I really wanted to look at the improvisation part of it. So that meant that I had to make a performance. It would be performance-based, not composed. And then I thought using performers to speak is very theatrical in a way that I didn't want at the time, at least. And also, the kind of performance that you get from performers on stage is only one kind of speaking, is one genre. Because I listen to a lot of different speech material, and what I became interested in is the differences between different speech genres. And also I read some linguistics and about discourse analysis, where they point at how the one layer of meaning in speech is actually the social aspect, which is expressed as in genres. I mean, you have literary genres when you write as well. Which kind of words you use and how you structure the sentences. But when you speak, those genres also include the way you speak. So if I speak very, very rhythmical, that's not very personal. It's like that's when you're on the news, you just refer to something outside yourself. Then you tend to speak very rhythmically, like that. But if I really speak very, 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 very dynamic and what you said, rubato maybe in music, then it conveys much more directly one-to-one relation, and all these kinds of genres of speaking became. I think that's part of the language, common language, not the personal idiosyncrasies you might have. You speak in a certain way and or dialect or from a country, but these kind of common genres became very interesting for me because they convey some information only using musical properties, really, dynamics, rhythm, tempo, pitch, range, and so forth. So that became kind of my that was what I wanted to use. I think there's some writers has written about this. I think there's a Russian linguist, Mikhail Bakhtin, has written that there's almost as many speech genres as there is social or thinkable social relations, because you use the kind of main categories as a starting point, and then you adjust to whoever you're talking with. If you're talking to a big crowd, as I'm not a big crowd, but a crowd anyway, like I'm doing now, I'm speaking differently than if I'm speaking to a child or many children, or yeah, of course. And then you personalize that relation from there. Yeah, so that so when I decided to focus on these genres, it became clear that I couldn't really use live performers, because that's only one genre. Reading poetry or something, that's one genre of speaking. Performing on stage, or yeah, that's you will get you can get some acting, but I wanted to see if I could use real authentic conversations as a starting point. And then so it became clear I had to use recordings then, because I couldn't have that on stage. It turned out it's also very difficult to have recordings of these authentic, as I imagined, conversations, because if you have a microphone, it's not authentic anymore. It's actually acting. So I haven't quite found a solution to that, but I have found some different material that I'm using. Some of the best is actually from a reality TV series. People being locked up in 3 months in a house, and after a while they forget that they're wearing mics all the time, so they behave quite natural at the end. And also, well, there's some more sources I have. Yeah, so from there I started to develop a system, software system, to allow me to use these recordings in real time, to improvise, kind of orchestrating this music out, on abstracting it, taking rhythm or tempo or pitch, harmonic content, and so forth. Deconstructing the musical structures of those recordings, and trying to put them together and in different ways, which I thought would be interesting musically. And I had no idea how it would sound like at the beginning, so I thought maybe, since I was using recordings, it would be electronic sounds, electroacoustic sound. But then I couldn't really relate to that in an improvised setting, coming from the piano and the keyboard instruments as I do. So I was really trying to solve that when I came over these small contact speakers that you can attach to any surface and make that surface into a speaker. So I experimented with those and found that if I attach them to different musical instruments with resonating bodies, like drums and the piano, of course, and guitars and so forth, with music boxes, then you would get this curious blend of electroacoustic sounds coming from the computer, which nevertheless had the sound from an instrument would actually kind of frame it as a musical statement, just by sounding as a musical instrument. And that was something that I was looking for, because when you hear a voice coming out of the speaker, then if you're not sitting down and expecting this to be music, then it kind of means broadcast or a radio or some playback of something, somebody speaking. But if you hear a musical instrument going by just a little sound, pling or pang, wow, then the frame is already set. This is presented as music. So that gave me a space to explore between this, the speakers and also the acoustic sound from the instrument and from my voice as well, on one side, and these hybrid sounds in between. And then yes, so from there, with this setup of this software and this orchestra, as I imagine it as, I have started to explore what could be done in a performance, and I'm still working on that. It's a work in progress. I'm not finished yet. I still have a year left in my my project, but I'm starting to kind of get something that I in the direction I want to go. And I'll just say one more thing about that system for you that was here last night. Just to explain what happened. Because after a while using these recordings, from the start I thought I would try to not to break it totally apart, these speech recordings, because I felt that I needed to retain the source, kind of the thing I wanted to retain was the time structure, because if you break it up in very tiny pieces or stretch it out in very long stretches, then it's not recognizable as speech anymore. So at first I wanted to kind of have the time structure as a basis, and then whatever you do with the actual sound, if you hear something that's proportioned in the breath-like lengths, it will come through as utterance. It's something that also a semiotician like Theo von Leuven has written about in relation to sound and the semiotic potential, he calls it. It's not it's not a set meaning, but the potential in any sound when you use it communicatively. If you have this breath-like length, we are kind of tuned into trying to read it as utterances, which is interesting in itself. But after doing that for a while, I found that it was very monotonous, only using, when you take away the words from speech, of course, there's a very limited range of pitch, usually, and of tempo, usually, and of events spread out in time. It gets very gray and boring after a while. So I had to overcome that, and also it was not very satisfying not being able to interact with this material musically, other than arranging it directly, which I could have done in a studio as well. It didn't have to be a performance. So then I developed this database approach, where every sound in of my recordings are analyzed according to their pitch and tempo and so forth, and with a statistical model of how each segment is following another. The computer can make new sequences based on that, which are just as likely, but of course gibberish in terms of semantic content. And as an added bonus of that, it can also interact with input, because if it analyzes the input of my voice or the piano, it can look into that database and find the most likely response regarding to the next likely pitch or the next likely length or whatever. And then this becomes sort of a Dadaist speech recognition system that reacts only on the prosodic content, the intonation, and doesn't care about what you actually say, which is a very curious apparatus to interact with. So that's what I'm working on now, trying to find ways to interact with this Babel machine. If you can play something, you could have a very appropriate response that's similar in, but you could also have something very strange. And when you get the words as well, then it becomes very poetic in a way. Yeah, so that's I think that's a lot of things about my project. And as I said, it's not finished yet, but these are the things I'm working on. And yeah, so I'll leave it at that actually.